Our attitude should be the same as that of Messiah Yeshua, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God, Yahweh, exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Yeshua HaMashiach is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Today we're going to look at the idea that Yeshua was born in December or not. Okay, and we're going to go to the first chapter of Luke as our reference. And I'm going to give you some ideas. You study this on your own. And we're going to start here in Luke, and we're going to read the event of Zechariah. Now, Zechariah was a priest. He was the husband of Elizabeth. Okay, and Elizabeth and Zechariah, they were the parents of John the Baptist, which was Yeshua's cousin. Okay, so let's just start reading. We're in Luke chapter 1, and we're going to start reading in verse 5. All right, in the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Okay, now Zechariah means Yahweh has remembered. Yahweh has remembered. Elizabeth means Elohim is my oath or my house or dwelling. Okay, Yahweh remembers, and Elohim is my house or dwelling or my oath. They were both descendants of Aaron, and if you have studied the Bible, you know that only the descendants of Aaron could be priests. Okay, Aaron was of the tribe of Levi. Only the Levites could work at the temple, but only the descendants of Aaron, who was a Levite, could be priests. Zechariah and his wife both were descendants of Aaron. Okay, continuing with verse 6, both of them were upright in the sight of God, that is Elohim, observing all the Lord's, Yahweh's commandments and regulations blamelessly, but they had no children because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well along in years. Okay, so verse 8, Zechariah, once when Zechariah's division was on duty, now we see up here, he was in the priestly division of Abijah. So the division that belongs to the Abijah was on duty. There were 24 divisions. And he was serving as priest before God. He was chosen by Lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of Yahweh and burn incense. And when the time came for burning, the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of Yahweh appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. Now there was an altar outside where they burned the offerings But there was also a small altar inside the holy place, inside the temple, not the Holy of Holies, but the first part you entered, the holy place. And that was a small altar that had incense, okay? When Zechariah saw him, that is the angel of Yahweh, standing there, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to give him the name Yohanan." And we say John in English. That's a transliteration, but his name literally means Yahweh Hanan, gracious. Yahweh is gracious. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of Yahweh. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with this word in English, these two words are Holy Spirit. In the Hebrew, that's Ruach Kadesh, Spirit of Holiness, Ruach HaKadosh. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from birth, okay, or from his mother's womb. Many of the people of Israel will he bring back to Yahweh their Elohim, and he will go on before Yahweh in the spirit and power of Elijah. Elijah means my Elohim is Yahweh. To turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for Yahweh. All right. So now, Zechariah questioned, he doubted, so, he said, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years." And the angel answered, "I am Gabriel." Gabriel means strength, Elohim. Elohim is strong, the strength of Elohim. "I stand in the presence of Elohim, of Yahweh, and I've been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their proper time." Okay. Verse 23, when his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among his people." Okay, back in those times, it was a disgrace. They considered it a disgrace not to be able to produce offspring, and specifically a male offspring. All right, so let's read. Mary visits Elizabeth. So now the birth of Yeshua is told, and now Mary goes to visit. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Kadesh. All right. So earlier, when the angel appeared to Mary, Gabriel, and told her that she would give birth to Yeshua, Zechariah doubted, but Mary right here just doesn't doubt, but she asked, "How will this come to be? How will this be, since I am a virgin?" Verse 35, the angel answered, "The Ruach HaKodesh will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who is said to be barren is in her 6th month. For nothing is impossible with Yahweh, with Elohim." Here in the New Testament, it's translated as God. That's verse 37 of chapter 1. So, now to find out whether or not Yeshua was born in December, and now I'm going to caveat this by saying probably, okay? Probably not born in December. You have to do a little research. Now, I've got a verse right here you can look up in your study, 1 Chronicles 24:10. Okay, you can also look at Nehemiah 12:12. But that tells you that the division that Zechariah belonged to, the priestly division of Abijah, okay, that they were on duty during week 8. Now, the priestly division was divided into 24 divisions. Okay, so they would serve for a week, and then 6 months later, they would serve for a week. So I'm going to read to you my notes, and we're going to let you in your own time do the research. Okay, Yeshua was, we'll put probably not born in December, because I like to leave room for things that I may not be considering and leave room for God to be God, Yahweh to be Yahweh, because his ways are much higher than ours. But according to the information we have, he was more than likely not born in December. Okay, Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant when Mary visited her, Luke 1:36. Right? We just read that. Which would have been December if she had conceived in June, right? If Elizabeth had conceived in June. 6 months later would have been December when Mary visited her. And that is when Zechariah completed his priestly duty for that year. John was born 3 months later. Now, we know John was born 3 months later. The question is, was it December when Mary visited her? But let's just go with that for a second. Let's say it was. That means John would have been born in March in our hypothetical situation. And Yeshua, 9 months later. Okay? Because when Mary was told by the angel Gabriel that she would give birth to Yeshua, that was news to her. She didn't know that. That was new information. And at that moment, the angel said that Elizabeth was already 6 months pregnant. Okay? So that means 9 months later, when Yeshua was born, Johannan the Baptist would have already been 6 months old. Okay? So under our scenario of, if John was born in March, Yeshua in September, this would probably be at the start of Sukkot, which is the fall festival of tabernacles. Luke 1:39, as soon as the angel Gabriel left Mary, she arose, got ready, and hurried to visit Elizabeth. So we know when Mary comes in to visit Elizabeth, when Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant and Mary has just found out that she's going to give birth, we know that Mary has 9 months to go and Elizabeth has 3 months to go. The question is, when did the angel Gabriel appear to Mary? Alternatively, now here's why I say we're just working on a hypothetical. Yeshua could have been born in March and John in September, but this is doubtful. Okay, so why do we say all that? Well, let's move on down. Zechariah, and I pointed out this verse earlier, 1 Chronicles 24:10. Okay, the priests were divided into 24 divisions, which served 1 week each, beginning at the sacred New Year, which is Abib 1. All right? And you can look up when Abib 1 is, but it it's at Passover. Okay, so we're talking March, April. It varies every year because of Abib 1, the Jewish month of Abib 1, or of Abib, is based on observing the new moon crescent. Okay, not the conjunction, but when you first see the crescent. All right. Now they had a civil new year, which began at Tishri, but the priestly division in the week you would serve was based on the first month of Abib or Aviv. Sometimes it's pronounced. So they would serve one time for a week and then again 6 months later. Zechariah belonged to the priestly division of Abijah, which was on duty during week 8. That would end up being June if you're starting in March, April, Abib 1, and again in week 32, December. So that means that if it was, let's just take the hypothetical, it was week 8 when he was, in the temple and the angel appeared to him, the first passage we read. Well, that means that 6 months later would have been December. Elizabeth would have been 6 months pregnant. And we know Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant when Mary came to visit her, and Mary had just found out she was pregnant. So 9 months later. Okay. So now alternatively, if it was week 32, the reverse would be true. That is, instead of Yeshua being born in the fall, he would have been born in the spring. Now, why do I think that Yeshua was more likely born in the fall than the spring? First of all, what we just went over knocks out December. Probably, okay. I'm going to say probably. But if it comes down to the spring versus the fall, why do I say that he was probably born in the fall? Well, this is just my opinion, but we're going to talk about the feasts real quick before we go. And I have written down a good memory aid for you for the feasts. Okay, now these are the 7 feasts. This does not include Hanukkah. Hanukkah came later after the Maccabean revolt. These are the feasts given in the Torah. Okay, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, atonement, tabernacles. And the way I remember that is just by the first letter. Puff, tat, puff patat. That works for me. Use what works for you. Okay. Puff patat. All right. So these are basically divided into three events because this Passover and unleavened bread, first fruits, all happens in the same 8-day period. Trumpets, atonements, tabernacles, these happen in basically a 2-week period at the end of the it's the end of the year, as far as not the end of the year, but within their year starting at Abib, this would be the last feast until the next Passover. So Pentecost is sometimes called weeks or Shavuot. It's also called Pentecost. And that's the feast that we're coming up on now. We're 15 days away. Okay, so each one of these has a special meaning. And if you look at the timeline of human history, they have a meaning too. These fall feasts represent numerous things, but one of the things they represent in Yeshua's second coming is the trumpet will sound, we will be made at one, and then we will dwell, tabernacles, with God, Yeshua reigning from the earth. Okay, now his first coming, he came as our Passover lamb, and he died on Passover. So he could have been born in the spring, that is true. But that's when he passed away. And of course, after 3 days and 3 nights, he rose from the grave. Tabernacles, him being with us, appears to me more likely. Okay, so if you're going to, as we said earlier, it was either spring or fall. Just my opinion only. Okay, technique only. You study it and decide for yourself which one you think is more likely, or some other month. But I think it was probably during the fall feast, and that's just my opinion. Okay, well, this is a very interesting study regardless. It's very common for people to say he was born at quote-unquote Christmas time. But if we read Yahweh's word, we find truth. Okay, that's all we have for today. You study these things out, prove them for yourself. May Yahweh add his blessings to the reading and the study of his word.